Have you noticed it too? The flood of TikToks from 22-year-olds panicking over their smile lines, the 19-year-olds already investing in retinol and preventative Botox, or the viral "I peaked in 2016" trend where people mourn their teenage faces like a lost era. Gen Z, a generation still in its early adulthood, is already convinced it's aging too fast. But this fear of growing older, especially for women, isn't just a fleeting TikTok trend. It's a deep-rooted anxiety that's been shaping beauty culture for centuries. Long before there were anti-aging serums and AI filters, there was ancient Roman lead powder, Elizabethan mercury creams, and 1950s cold cream commercials warning women not to let themselves go. Across history, the message has stayed hauntingly consistent. A woman's value peaks when she's young and fades with every wrinkle, every freckle. Every moment she looks more like her mother. Today, we're just experiencing that pressure in high definition. With social media filters that auto-airbrush your face and algorithms that favor the dewy-skinned 19-year-old over the tired-looking 29-year-old. The fear of aging isn't cultural, it's algorithmic. Even our front-facing cameras have turned into a kind of digital funhouse mirror, warping our perception of how we should look. In this video, we're going to unpack why Gen Z feels like it's running out of time before it's even begun. We'll trace the evolution of anti-aging anxiety from Victorian-era youth obsession to the Hollywood starlet's desperate grip on relevance, through the Botox boom of the 90s and early 2000s, all the way to the AI-generated beauty standards. Chapter 1. The TikTok Age Panic. Open TikTok and you'll find yourself in what feels like a digital wrinkle epidemic, but the wrinkles belong to people barely old enough to rent a car. Gen Z, many of whom are still in their early 20s, are documenting their aging journeys like middle-aged women in the early 2000s clutching bottles of Olay Regenerist. You'll see 21-year-olds agonizing over smile lines, 22-year-olds booking Botox just in case, and teenagers declaring they've already lost their baby face, as if that were a tragedy. It sounds like satire, but it's not. It's a real cultural phenomenon, one rooted in a new kind of age anxiety, one that's happening decades earlier than it used to. So how did we get here? Unlike millennials, Gen Z is the first generation to come of age entirely in front of a front-facing camera. While millennials remember life before filters, before Instagram, and before high-definition everything, Gen Z never had that buffer. From the moment they started documenting their lives online, often in middle school, they were seeing themselves through a lens that was already enhanced. Smooth skin, bright eyes, sharper jawlines, zero pores. Snapchat's infamous beauty filter, introduced in the 2010s, didn't just add a glow, it altered bone structure, and for Gen Z, that warped version of themselves became normalized. When you grow up seeing a digitized version of your face that's just slightly more perfect, just enough to erase the humanity out of it, looking in a real mirror becomes a disorienting experience. Pores feel like a flaw. Smile lines feel like a failure. Even blinking wrong on camera can feel like a crime. The face isn't just being observed, it's being surveilled. Then there's the role of the TikTok algorithm itself, an echo chamber of beauty obsession. Its For You page doesn't just reflect your interests, it amplifies them. Once you engage with a few skincare videos or click on a post about preventative aging, you're plunged into a never-ending loop of get ready with me routines, product hauls, and 19-year-olds revealing the exact serum cocktail they use to preserve their youth. The culture of overexposure creates a sense of urgency. Suddenly, every girl next door is giving you a dermatologist-level advice, often without any credentials, but with glowing, glassy skin that suggests that they know something you don't. Even worse, the content doesn't just come from older influencers. It comes from your peers. That's part of what makes this age panic so intense. It's not aspirational women in their 40s pushing anti-aging products. It's people the same age or even younger. When your 18-year-old mutual is talking about Botox touch-ups and buccal fat removal, aging becomes something you're expected to prevent before it even begins. Take, for example, the bizarre rise of baby Botox, a trend where teenagers and people in their early 20s inject small doses of Botox not to reverse signs of aging, but to preemptively freeze them. The logic is simple. If chilling, if you never let the muscle move, you'll never get the wrinkle. And while dermatologists and beauty insiders debate the ethics and science of such procedures, the demand is skyrocketing. But this panic isn't really about vanity. Not at its core, it's about visibility. Social media platforms reward youth and beauty. To be relevant, to be seen, you must look like you belong in the feed. and the feed increasingly favors the filtered, flawless, and young. When 16-year-old influencers with baby soft skin and lip filler are landing brand deals that once went to seasoned professionals in their late 20s, it sends a clear, cruel message. Youth isn't just a phase, it's a currency, and it depreciates fast. This creates a warped timeline of self-worth. Where previous generations may have started worrying about crow's feet in their late 30s, Gen Z is already lamenting the loss of their baby face by 21. There's a sense that if you don't look young enough, you're already being edged out of the conversation, not just in beauty but in relevance. You're not just aging out of aesthetics, you're aging out of attention. Have you ever looked at a filtered photo of yourself and felt like the real you suddenly seemed wrong, less polished, less pretty, and less lovable? That strange moment of disconnection isn't just personal, it's the outcome of decades of beauty marketing, now digitized and hyper-targeted. It's not your insecurity, it's a design. So the better question is, what happens when we stop playing along? Chapter 2, the Victorian cult of youth. To understand Gen Z's fear of aging, we have to travel back long before Instagram filters or Botox injections, all the way to the 19th century, where the seeds of anti-aging anxiety were already being sown. The Victorian era, often romanticized for its lace collars and afternoon teas, was also a time of intense and often toxic beauty standards. While today's young women may be chasing retinol and serums and lip fillers, their great-great-grandmothers were quietly poisoning themselves in the name of youth and social survival. In Victorian society, a woman's worth was almost entirely tethered to her appearance, and more specifically, her youthful beauty. The cultural ideal was one of delicate fragility, pale skin, unspoiled features, signs that a woman was both upper class and unmarred by the burdens of age and labor. The pressure to look youthful wasn't just about vanity, it was about value. A woman's marriageability, often her only real avenue for social mobility or financial security, was highest between the ages of 16 and 25. After that, her chances, much like her supposed bloom, began to fade. This anxiety wasn't subtle. Young women were constantly reminded through etiquette manuals, literature, and advertisements that their time was running out. The idea of a woman wilting with age wasn't just a metaphor. It was treated like a biological inevitability and a moral failing. Women were expected to remain physically and emotionally fresh, like flowers plucked at their peak, and that meant taking drastic measures to preserve their youth. Victorian beauty treatments were both elaborate and dangerous. Women used lead-based face powders to achieve the pale, flawless complexion that signaled refinement and class. The powder created a smooth porcelain finish, but also slowly poisoned the wearer over time, leading to hair loss, skin damage, and even death. Mercury-based creams promised to fade freckles and age spots, while arsenic wafers, yes, literal poison, were marketed as beauty supplements to keep the skin soft, white, and youthful. These products were often sold discreetly, wrapped in fine paper or small tins, and advertised with euphemisms like complexion enhancers or skin tonics. And while these treatments were horrifyingly toxic, the cultural messaging was even more insidious. Beauty manuals at the time, often written by male doctors or moralists, warned women that aging signs like lines or sagging skin were not just unattractive, but reflections of inner decay. In this worldview, to age visibly was to reveal too much of your labor, your emotion, and your life lived. Youth, in contrast, symbolized virtue, purity, and moral correctness. This obsession with eternal youth was mirrored in the literature of the era. Consider Oscar Wilde's The Picture of Dorian Gray, the ultimate cautionary tale about vanity and moral corruption. Dorian remains young and beautiful, while his hidden portrait ages grotesquely, reflecting his eternal decay. It's no coincidence that this tale of aesthetic obsession ends in madness and self-destruction. Or take Lucy Westenra in Dracula. Her angelic beauty and youthful innocence are emphasized over and over, making her transformation into a vampire, and her subsequent decay all that much more horrifying. These stories reinforce the idea that to age, especially as a woman, was to lose not just beauty, but virtue, relevance, and identity. At the same time, the early cosmetic industry was beginning to take shape. Companies like Pond's and Pears began marketing cold creams and soaps that promised to restore youth, revive the bloom, and erase the ravages of time. While modern branding often leans into scientific language, hyaluronic acid, collagen peptides, Victorian ads leaned into metaphors of decay and purity. The subtext was clear. A good woman is a youthful woman, and a youthful woman is one who is still wanted. And does this sound familiar? Although our products have changed, and thankfully no longer contain arsenic, the message has stayed largely the same. Youth is something to preserve at all costs, and aging is something to hide. The pressure may now come from TikTok trends and Instagram reels instead of Victorian etiquette books. But the stakes haven't changed. Whether it's a lead powder compact or a ring light and filter, women have always been taught that the passage of time makes them less desirable, less visible, and less worthy. And the fear wasn't just about looking old, it was about becoming invisible. For Victorian women, aging meant retreating from public life, becoming less eligible, less influential, and more confined. Today we might call it aging out of the algorithm, but the core fear is the same. If you are no longer youthful, are you still seen at all? And what's scarier to you, looking older or being ignored? For Victorian women, the two were inseparable, and maybe for all our modern advancements, they still are. And let me know in the comments below, do you think the fear of aging is really about appearance, or is it about something deeper, being forgotten, overlooked, or replaced? I mean, I feel like it's a combination of things, and that's just society doing that to women in many ways. Chapter 3. Hollywood's Golden Age and the Eternal Starlet. If the Victorian era planted the seeds of age-related beauty anxiety, then Hollywood's Golden Age turned it into a glossy, high-stakes spectacle. By the 30s and 40s, the burgeoning film industry wasn't just creating stars, it was creating icons of eternal youth, goddesses who shimmered on screen with skin like porcelain and lips painted in technicolor perfection. Women like Greta Garbo, Jean Harlow, and Rita Hayworth, and Marilyn Monroe weren't just admired, they were defied. And the one thing that they all had in common, youth. Or at the very least, the illusion of it. Behind the scenes, this illusion was tightly controlled by the studio system, and an empire where stars were signed to multi-year contracts and expected to adhere to strict standards, not just in acting ability, but in appearance. Age was not just a number, it was a liability. Many actresses were instructed to lie about their birthdays, shaving off years to extend their shelf life. In the public eye, a woman in her early 30s could still play a young woman, but only if she never looked her age, and certainly never admitted it. Meanwhile, their male counterpart stars like Cary Grant, Clark Gable, and later Humphrey Bogart continued to age with grace, charm, and the implicit permission of the industry. These men often played romantic leads opposite actresses half their age, reinforcing a cinematic double standard. Men aged into wisdom, and while women aged into irrelevance. It wasn't just casting, it was a contract lost. Studios had the power to release actresses who no longer fit the visual ideal, regardless of their talent. Even behind the camera, directors and producers were favored to train tight shots of fresh-faced starlets, often using gauze over the lens or overexposed lighting to soften the lines and create an ethereal glow. Makeup artists perfected the use of contouring, highlights, and early airbrushing techniques, all to preserve the illusion of youth. And when makeup and lighting weren't enough, cosmetic surgery entered the frame, quietly but unmistakably. By the late 40s and early 50s, Hollywood insiders whispered about discreet nose jobs, chin tucks, and even the early precursors of the modern facelift. Though these procedures were rarely acknowledged publicly, to do so would break the spell. They became a silent requirement for many women hoping to maintain their careers. Looking young wasn't just about beauty, it was about survival. This culture of anxiety reached its most haunting form in Billy Wilder's Sunset Boulevard in 1950, a film that captured the dark underbelly of Hollywood's obsession with youth. Gloria Swanson's character, Norma Desmond, is a former silent film star and now aged out of fame. She's confined to her mansion, clinging to old scripts, false lashes, and delusions of her comeback. Her most famous line, "I'm big, it's the pictures that got small." It's just about Hollywood. It's about how women are allowed to be enormous, iconic, even only when they're young. Once they age, they're rendered small, ridiculous, and grotesque. And yet, Norma isn't a villain. She's a tragic figure, a mirror reflecting Hollywood's fear of female aging back at itself. The real horror isn't her desperation, it's the system that made her feel that growing older was a crime. And Sunset Boulevard gave the voice to the experience of countless women in the industry, valued, celebrated, then forgotten once the glow faded. This anxiety wasn't confined to actresses, it spilled into public consciousness, shaping beauty ideals across the country. Women who idolized Marilyn Monroe or Ava Gardner began emulating not just their style, but their stillness, that frozen perfection that suggested time had no power over them. Ads from the 50s and 60s began selling creams and devices used by Hollywood stars, implying that if starlets could defy age, so could you, for the right price. This commodification of agelessness would later explode into a billion-dollar anti-aging industry, but its roots are right here in the dark rooms of Hollywood makeup trailers. What the golden age of Hollywood really perfected was not beauty, it was illusion. Actresses didn't just perform roles, they performed youth again and again, long past the point where they were allowed to age naturally. The price of fame wasn't just privacy, it was time, or rather the ability to show time on your face. What happens when beauty becomes a performance? When youth is not just a phase, but a role you're forced to play over and over again. And most of all, what do we sacrifice to keep the illusion alive? And let me know in the comments below, have you ever felt the pressure to look a certain way, not because you wanted to, but because you feared disappearing if you didn't? Chapter 4, the 90s anti-aging boom. By the time we enter the 1990s, anti-aging culture doesn't just exist, it thrives. This was the decade when wrinkle prevention became a full-blown lifestyle, and skincare aisles transformed into battlegrounds lined with tiny, expensive jars promising eternal youth. The phrase anti-aging no longer belonged to your mom's night cream. It became a marketing goldmine aimed at women barely out of college. This was the rise of hope in a jar, not just metaphorically, but literally. One of the best-selling products of the time, by the brand Philosophy, and it was called exactly that. These moisturizers and serums didn't just promise hydration or softness, they promised prevention with phrases like reverse the signs of aging or defend your youth, printed in elegant fonts across the pastel packaging. The implication was clear. Aging was no longer an eventuality, it was an enemy, one that could and should be fought. New ingredients became the buzzword of the moment: retinol, glycolic acid, vitamin C, and collagen. These weren't just treatments, they were armor. Dermatologists began appearing on morning talk shows to explain why women in their 20s should already be investing in their skin, using the kind of preventative language once reserved for things like health screenings or life insurance. It wasn't enough to look good now, you had to prepare for what you'd look like in 20 years. And major beauty brands like Estee Lauder, Clinique, Lancome, and Oil of Olay caught on quickly. Their ads began targeting a younger demographic than ever before. Where once wrinkle creams were marketed to women over 40, now it was for the proactive 25-year-old. The new tagline, "Don't wait for lines, stop them before they start." The language of skincare shifted from repair to prevention. If aging showed up on your face, it meant you had failed to be vigilant. But this moment didn't exist in a vacuum. It was shaped by the aesthetics and celebrity cultures of the time. The 1990s ushered in the Y2K beauty ideal: thin, tanned, toned, and seemingly ageless. This era gave us Jennifer Aniston's glow on Friends, the barely there brows and sun-kissed skin of Kate Moss, and Britney Spears in the bedazzled crop top. The dominant beauty narrative was less about embracing individuality and more about preserving a very narrow window of desirability, somewhere between 18 and 25. Magazines like Allure, Cosmopolitan, and 17 flooded readers with skincare advice, age-defying product roundups, and lists like 10 ways to keep your skin looking young. And while there was some empowerment in the idea of women taking control of their routines, there was also a growing panic embedded in the messaging. If you didn't act now, you'd be left behind. And I remember having all of those magazines when I was a kid. I had a subscription for them, and I definitely remember shopping at Clinique in high school. And wrinkles weren't just a sign of aging, they were a sign of laziness, of neglect, and not caring enough. And then came the medicalization of beauty. While plastic surgery had been around for decades, the late 90s marked a turning point. Cosmetic injectables, Botox, which had been used for medical purposes since the 80s, received FDA approval for cosmetic use in 2002. But it had already become a Hollywood secret weapon by the end of the 90s. And it's true, like, movie stars always get things first, so they were probably doing it before it was even FDA approved, probably. And celebrities weren't just relying on night creams, they were quietly erasing expression lines and freezing their foreheads into place. The beauty media was flooded with euphemisms like freshening up or a little maintenance, and while no one openly admitting to getting Botox, the results were unmistakable. Smooth, motionless foreheads became a new standard of effortless beauty. And just like that, effort was invisible. The era also gave rise to the idea that aging wasn't a natural process, it was a personal failure. If you had crow's feet or smile lines, it wasn't just the result of living a joyful, expressive life. It meant you didn't exfoliate enough, you didn't invest in the right serum, you didn't care enough about yourself to fight back. Anti-aging culture subtly weaponized self-care, turning into a moral obligation. This mentality laid the foundation for today's even more intense routines. The 12-step routines, the $500 facials, the 22-year-olds booking Botox appointments. It all began in the 90s, the decade when youth became not just a phase, but a full-time job. Can we really age gracefully in a world that keeps moving the goalposts for what beauty is? When every new product or procedure is sold as the key to staying relevant, and what does natural aging even mean anymore? Let me know in the comments below. Do you feel like beauty is more empowering today or just more exhausting? I mean, to me, it's just more exhausting because of social media and everything. Chapter 5, Filters, Facetune, and the AI Anxiety. We've now entered what can only be described as a post-truth beauty era. A time the concept of what's real is not just blurred, but deliberately distorted. In the past, beauty standards were shaped by film, fashion, and magazines. Today, they're shaped by code. The most influential beauty editors are now apps, algorithms, and artificially generated ideals, one that whispers through your front-facing cameras. You could look better. You should look better. Why don't you already look like this? Apps like TikTok and Instagram and Snapchat now include built-in filters that automatically enhance your face the moment you open the camera. No need to toggle them on. They're just there, smoothing your skin, sharpening your jawline, enlarging your eyes, and subtly tweaking your bone structure. Some of these filters are gentle, just adding a touch of glow or blush. Others are so extreme that they leave you looking like an uncanny hybrid of yourself and an Instagram model generated by an AI trained on Victoria's Secret catalogs and K-pop idols. And while these filters might seem playful, even harmless, something to enhance a selfie or elevate your get ready with me, they have profoundly altered how we see ourselves. For many, the filtered version of their face becomes the default, the goal, the version of themselves they wish they were. And this mental shift from seeing filters as a fantasy to using them as a benchmark has birthed a very real psychological condition now referred to as filter dysmorphia. Plastic surgeons around the world are reporting a surge in young patients, often in their teens and early 20s, bringing in filtered photos of themselves as reference images for procedures. They don't want to look like a celebrity or model. They want to look like their own digitally altered reflection. And the problem? That reflection isn't real, and it never was. Add AI into the mix, and the distortion becomes even more surreal. Tools like FaceApp, Bold Glamour, and AI photo editors on platforms like YouCam and Lensa go far beyond basic filters. They can show your ideal face according to abstract beauty standards. Higher cheekbones, fuller lips, smoother skin, and bigger eyes. I've tried the Lensa, and it's true. You can make your lips look bigger, your nose smaller, eyes. It is crazy what you can do. And they can de-age you by decades or show what you'll look like in 30 years. Some apps even give you multiple ethnically diverse versions of yourself, a deeply problematic feature that commodifies cultural features under the guise of exploration. These tools don't just edit photos, they rewrite your identity. And for Gen Z, a generation still actively developing their sense of self, this creates a dangerous psychological split. Who is the real me? The person in the mirror or the one in the feed who gets all the likes, compliments, and validation? And here's the kicker. The AI version of you will always win. It's engineered to. It's not vulnerable to bad lighting, breakouts, or exhaustion. It doesn't age, sweat, or change with time. It's a static perfection. And when that's the version of you that gets the most attention, the most engagement, the most love, how long before it becomes the only version you can accept? This kind of pressure doesn't just erode self-esteem, it fuels a deeply existential anxiety that time is slipping away, that your face is deteriorating, and that your body is failing you by daring to change. It creates a sense of urgency to act, to buy the serum, book the injection, follow the 10-step skincare routine to preserve your filtered self in real life. And while previous generations compared themselves to celebrities on magazine covers, Gen Z is now comparing themselves to themselves, or rather a version of themselves that has been airbrushed by artificial intelligence and approved by an algorithm. This isn't just a beauty crisis, it's a reality crisis. What does it mean to be beautiful in a world where beauty can be manufactured, swapped, and smoothed, and sold by software? What happens when your digital selves become the blueprint we measure our real faces against, and find ourselves constantly falling short? If the only version of you that gets compliments, likes, and visibility is the AI edited one, is that the version of you start to believe in? Is that the one you start to become? And if so, what does that say about how we value authenticity or even recognize it anymore? Do you ever feel like you're living in a filtered version of yourself? And if so, how do you break free from that? So why does Gen Z feel like it's aging faster? Because beauty culture, from lead powder to Botox to filters, has always been about control over how women are seen, valued, and remembered. What's new is that now we're not just seeing unattainable standards in magazines or on movie screens. We're applying them to ourselves every day through our phones. For centuries, women have been taught that their worth declines with age. Gen Z just inherited a digital version of that message, faster, louder, and more intimate than ever before. But here's the hopeful twist. Every time we've faced this pressure, we've always rebelled against it. From the flappers in the 20s rejecting corsets, to the body positive movements of the 2010s, to creators today showing their unfiltered skin, there's always been a pushback, and maybe that's the future Gen Z can build. One where aging isn't a crisis but a chapter, where beauty isn't measured in lines or likes. And what if aging wasn't something to be feared, but something to be reclaimed? Let me know in the comments below. What are your thoughts on aging in the digital age? Do you feel like it's harder to accept your reflection today than in the past? And how do you think we can redefine beauty going forward?